My name is Amanda Palazzo, and I am a research scholar here at YASA. And today I'm going to talk to you about our ISWell Nexus modeling tool for the Zambezi. This work is a collective effort of many researchers here at YASA and in the basin, so I would like to take a moment to acknowledge their efforts. I will go through the main features of the modeling framework and the models, show you a bit about how we use the framework as it is applied to examine the Nexus impacts across different development scenarios, and then finally offer some benefits of the modeling framework and tools. The Zambezi is one of the largest river basins in Africa and is home to more than 40 million people. It's rich in land and water resources. Livelihoods in the region are tied to agricultural developments and are mostly characterized by high levels of poverty. The population of the basin is estimated to reach 80 million by 2050, and the GDP is projected to grow by about 5% per year. Investing in hydropower and irrigation is considered a strategy for realizing the economic potential of the basin. Significant investments in water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure in the region are also required. So why should we adopt a water, energy, and land nexus approach for the Zambezi? As I mentioned before, low access, excuse me. Sorry, I'm having a water security problem myself. Okay, as I mentioned before, low access to wash services in the region, rising water demand for all sectors, low water quality and treatment, and low capacity to cope with floods and droughts are all challenges faced by the water sector. The land sector is plagued by low agricultural productivity, high food insecurity, relatively little crop diversification, and issues of erosion and land degradation are widespread. Although there is high reliance on hydropower, most is sent to the Southern African power pool, and access to clean energy is for most of the population is quite low. Evaporative losses from reservoir storage is also significant. For the most part, these are sector-focused challenges, but as they interact across the sectors, we can see more challenges emerging. For example, upper and middle stream irrigation expansion affects stream flows. The temporary reservoir storage impacts water availability for irrigation during critical growing periods, and the risk that large-scale hydropower facilities pose to the environment due to the transformation of the hydrological landscape. On top of that, we have the challenges associated with variations across different countries and subbasins, which also includes the natural climate variability. The future sectoral development plans, the impacts of a changing climate and impacts of a changing climate and a growing population add further challenges, which all interact across the Nexus. We developed an integrated Nexus modeling framework, the INMF, which I will just call the framework for ease, which allows us to assess the water, energy, and land nexus and examine the interdependencies of investments for sustainable Nexus development. The framework links 5 of YASA's state-of-the-art models, which are featured here in the center column. We have a process-based hydrological model, CWAT-M, a crop model, EPIC, a water quality model, MARINA, two economic optimization models, one of land use, GLOBIOM, and one of water use, ECHO. The 3 main models, CWAT-M, ECHO, and GLOBIOM, use the same harmonized input data, and they are soft-linked, which means that relative inputs of one model are used as relevant outputs of one model are used as inputs for the other model. The secondary models, EPIC and MARINA, provide input data or assess the impacts of the main models by using their outputs. Under the column scenarios here, you can see that we use the framework to evaluate the impacts of investments in water access and sanitation, hydropower expansion, irrigation development, and policies, climate mitigation and stream flow protections, and also take a look at regional trends in socioeconomic development and climate change. The framework is modular, which allows for detailed representation of each sector, and it's scalable, which allows for input data or quantitative modeling results to be upscaled from households or land units to subbasins within a larger basin. EPIC and CWAT-M use the meteorological forcing data as an input and provide information on crop yields and fertilizer requirements, and CWAT-M provides hydrological information such as runoff, discharge, groundwater recharge, and environmental flows. In an iterative process, the changes in water availability and water demand estimates from CWAT-M, ECHO, and GLOBIOM are passed between the optimization and processing runs, which ensures that the Nexus challenges, trade-offs, and synergies are modeled in an integrated way. Developments of the agriculture sector modeled by GLOBIOM including expansion of irrigated area and water withdrawals for irrigation, are included within ECHO, which models the resulting impact of how water is transferred to downstream users across the basin. And then finally, changes in cropland area, crop production, and fertilizer applications are passed from GloBiome at the subbasin level, along with runoff and discharge from CWAT-M to MARINA, which quantifies the nutrient loading from agricultural production and domestic wastewater. The integrated framework then allows us to examine the impacts of the basin policies and investments over a wide set of nexus indicators, which you can see listed here, with the blue colored ones indicating water focused, purple energy focused, and green land focused. I'll now go into a little bit more detail about the individual models that make up the framework and how they were adapted for use in the Zambezi. The community water model is an open source, large scale integrated hydrological channel model. I'll avoid describing this model twice as Adriano already presented it. You can see a graphical representation of CWAT-M here. So we refined the existing spatial boundaries for the basin by splitting a number of subbasins into smaller subbasins, resulting in a 21 subbasin network that are connected, which you can see here on the image to the upper right. As you can also see in the figure at the bottom, which is the average monthly discharge, the spatial resolution of CWAT-M is 30 arcseconds, which is then aggregated to the subbasin level for sharing across the framework. Calibration assures that the main hydrological processes are simulated as best as possible. Calibration was done using 5 subcatchments, and the measured discharge was provided by the Global Runoff Data Center. The figures here show the calibration for the Lukulu station. The second main model that I want to talk to you about is the land use model GloBiome. GloBiome is a global partial equilibrium model that is used to model the supply and demand of agricultural products at a high spatial resolution that considers the impacts of global socioeconomic and climate change on food, fiber, and feed markets. GloBiome models 18 major crops, which covers 91% of the Zambezi cropland area. The representation of global trade and socioeconomic development and market feedbacks through price changes in the framework, it allows us to model the impacts of the Zambezi level analysis it allows them to be globally consistent. GloBiome provides indicators of regional crop and livestock production and demand, international trade, land use change and emissions, food security, irrigated area by crop and system, water demands for irrigation, and irrigation investment costs and benefits. Currently, about 183,000 hectares of cropland area in the Zambezi is irrigated, representing only 5% of the region's irrigation potential. Irrigation systems are represented by 4 main types of irrigation, which take into account different biophysical and economic suitability and also cropping intensities. The irrigation water demand by crop takes into account the cropping calendar and monthly irrigation crop water requirements, and considers how climate change impacts irrigation requirements in the future. We also take into account the source of water, so surface or groundwater, the spatial and temporal availability, meaning the water has to be physically available in the location during the time that it's needed. And we take into account the competing water demand from other sectors, which I mentioned before comes from CWAT-M and ECHO. Improved maps of land cover and land use help us to improve the regional context as well. We add to our existing database, which includes national and subnational level geographic information, other economic statistics, and information on infrastructure, production and consumption trends, and potentials. I've listed here a subset of data that we are currently using to improve the regional context. So we know that detailed information on the locations of crops and agricultural land is essential to inform national food and agricultural policies. We use an optimization method to allocate national and subnational crop statistics that is also informed by spatial information on the drivers of crop location. We accounted for missing and incomplete agricultural statistics by incorporating additional and more detailed information on the location of crops from other sources such as OpenStreetMap to better know the location of various agricultural estates in the region. In this case, this is the Zambia Sugar Company. You can see both the Google image here and the downscaled crop areas. Sorry, a little too fast. The third model in our framework is ECHO. ECHO is a linear optimization model of the water system. ECHO aims to minimize the total investment and operating costs of a wide variety of water management options to satisfy sectoral water demands and considers various water supply sources and infrastructure across the subbasins. ECHO provides indicators at the subbasin level of water use, withdrawals from hydropower, irrigation, agriculture, municipal and industrial uses, different water supply technologies, and investment costs and benefits. So the figure here shows the installed and planned hydropower facilities and main irrigated crops around the year 2010 in the basin. The hydropower generation is one of the major economic activities with an installed capacity of about 5,000 megawatts. Future hydropower expansion plans, indicated by the green triangles here, include more than 11,000 megawatts. Our framework considers both the benefits and trade-offs of hydropower and irrigated areas located in close proximity. For example, water diversion, restrictions for irrigation during critical growing periods to maintain water for hydropower production, which would affect irrigation development potential. The final model I would like to talk to you about briefly is the model to assess river inputs of nutrients to seas, or MARINA for short. MARINA is a nutrient model that quantifies river export of different nutrient forms to the river mouth by source. You can see in the figure here on the left the kinds of activities taken into account: agricultural nutrient inputs from crop and livestock production, domestic and industrial wastewater and sanitation, and other natural sources of nutrients. The figure in the middle and on the upper right hand side show a bit more about the connection of upstream and middle stream basins to the downstream basins. The figure on the bottom here shows the total digestible nutrient yields across the basin in 2010 and also the source of those nutrients. So how have we applied our regionally adapted modeling framework to examine regional development scenarios, or regional development pathways? As Barbara and Piotr mentioned already, we co-developed basin scenarios by identifying basin priorities and challenges and joint visions for the future up to 2050. Slide got a little bit messed up, sorry. Here you can see the three scenarios based on the prioritization of different development plans and environmental goals. The BAU is a reference scenario of development where different sectors take a siloed approach to the development plans for the future, and they fail to adapt to the plans of the other sectors. The econ scenario centers the future around maximizing all available natural resources across all sectors for the sake of improving socioeconomic well-being. The environment scenario envisions a sustainable development pathway, minimizing trade-offs across sectors by promoting innovation aimed to maintain the basin's natural capital. The short descriptions here offer some insights into the differences in policies and investment decisions across the scenarios and sectors. Okay. So we take these policy assumptions and investment decisions into the framework and examine the impacts across a range of economic, environmental, and social indicators. We find that future joint development of hydropower and irrigation could create negative impacts on the environment, especially in mid and downstream subbasins, in the absence of environmental protection policies. The water scarcity index of the basin as the whole increases. The figure on the right here shows the current and future water scarcity index at a subbasin level, where future increases in water utilization raise the level of water scarcity to extreme levels in 8 of the most populated subbasins under the business as usual, and 7 of the subbasins under the econ scenario. You can see examples of the shift to the extreme water scarcity in the Kafue Basin here in the middle, and continued exacerbation of the existing extreme water scarcity in the Shire River Basin downstream and to the far right. Future developments in the Zambezi are expected to substantially increase food and energy production and related benefits over the coming years. You can see from the figure on the right here the economic costs and benefits of the scenarios. The economic benefits of hydropower production will increase and cover the total investment costs to expand capacity. A majority of the investments that you see here are devoted to surface water diversion and ensuring domestic water supply, though in the sustainability scenario, a large share will be devoted to groundwater pumping. Ambitious irrigation expansion plans can only be achieved when large-scale irrigation infrastructure costs are covered by public funds. It is estimated that the economic benefits for human health and productivity from improved access to clean water and sanitation more than double the investment costs. However, as you see here, Even when we take a conservative assumption that only about half of those economic benefits can be realized, by 2050, the benefits still clearly outweigh the costs in both the business as usual and the economic scenario, and nearly outweigh the costs in the environment scenario. I would like to note, though, that these benefits do not include any economic benefits from the improved ecosystem services. Sustainable development does not decrease so dramatically the private benefits for irrigation and hydropower, which you can see here is indicators 1 and 7, but rather increases the social and environmental benefits. The population with improved access to wash services is highest, as well as the regional self-sufficiency, the avoided GHG emissions, and the river flows, all in the sustainable development environment scenario. One of the benefits of the framework is that not only can it reveal the trade-offs between sectors and competing for the same resource, but it can help us to identify solutions for achieving the development goals. As I hinted already, a solution to achieving multiple development goals may be in the exploration of groundwater resources, which can provide a way to buffer the natural climate variability in the region, but also provide a way to allow hydropower to take priority of surface water. In this figure of the Shire River Basin, where the high level of resource utilization is driven by all three sectors, the domestic, irrigation, and hydropower, which is in the form of run of the river, you can see that groundwater resources in the environment scenario, the third column, or so this one down here, allow more water to be used for hydropower. And under the economic scenario, groundwater is a new source of water for irrigation, more than tripling the amount of water that is available and used for irrigation. Our framework relies on the idea that continued regional cooperation and integration remains a priority for the basin. The establishment and continued support by the basin countries of the River Basin Organization, ZAMCOM, is a testament to the commitment to cooperation. To realize the goals of sustainable development, ZAMCOM will need to continue to facilitate agreements among member countries. I've talked a lot about the regional development pathways and goals, but if we link them directly with the sustainable development goals, we can see how useful the framework actually is. The sustainable development goals are transversal and interlinked, which means that the achievement of any one goal depends on achieving the other goals. We found that investments in agriculture and hydropower development do contribute to achieving SDG 2, 7, and 12. However, the success of those goals depends on regulation and policies aimed to protect the environment. Otherwise, goals 6, 15, and 13 may be put further out of reach. Furthermore, we know that chronic dehydration and exposure to waterborne pathogens exacerbate the challenges of undernutrition and childhood stunting, which then ties the successes of SDG 6 with the successes of SDG 2. Universal access to clean water and sanitation in the Zambezi will also contribute significantly to SDG 5, relieving women of a disproportionate time burden for family water collection. Finally, the achievement of the SDGs and the basin development goals depend on SDG 17 partnerships between intergovernment agencies like ZAMCOM and the public and private sector actors within the 8 countries. As I've said before, the framework is valuable as an integrative approach for the water, energy, and land nexus because it's designed to be modular, allowing linkages between models through inputs and outputs. It represents all sectors of the nexus and includes economic feedbacks from changes in prices in agricultural products and water, energy, and land resources. The local context can be improved with available basin input data, and its modular approach relies on state-of-the-art established tools and optimization methods that aim to find solutions. Furthermore, it has a high level of regionally appropriate disaggregation, which makes it transferable to other basins. We have shown how to establish a large basin network and connection to a spatial grid, and consider also the intra-annual variability across users during low and high flow months. And finally, we can consider the dynamic changes of the global context through international trade, which makes the framework regionally appropriate and globally consistent. To summarize our achievements and impact, I will highlight 2 areas, our tools and our capacity development. We built the integrated nexus modeling framework, the INMF, and provided results to the framework applied to the basin scenarios on the Zambezi Scenario Explorer platform. As Barbara and Piotr have already mentioned, we have found that the participatory scenario tool was of quite of some interest to the stakeholders in the basin. Aside from conducting several basin training sessions and lectures in the basin, we've had the privilege to work with and train 2 young scientists from the region who looked at the water footprints of Malawi and sustainability and the suitability of rain-fed rice in Zambia. And I think that one of our scientists might even be on this webinar with us, which is very nice to see. So without any delay, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for this great presentation. So we have already several questions, and then more questions may come up. Please use Q&A. Amanda, I would like to give you a challenge, the difficult question. You have one participant who actually asked how these models are working. So it's a kind of fundamental. And if you could use it, you could answer this without using too many technical terms. But I think what the question is about, is it a statistical model? We just look at some regression and correlation. Is it maybe some economic model which looks for equilibria, calculates the equilibria, and from this gets the results? Or maybe it's kind of dynamic model like system dynamics or agent based. If you could say a little bit, because I think we haven't mentioned this for both models, which Adriana was presenting in you, and some people may still not be clear on this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So GloBiome is a partial equilibrium optimization model. So it is considers the major users of land and it tries to maximize the consumer and the producer surplus, given a number of constraints on land resources, constraints on water resources, and also takes into account the costs associated with converting different kinds of land to different land cover types. Okay, sorry, maybe that was a little bit too technical. I'll try again. Echo is also a linear optimization model that's aimed to minimize the costs. So its goal is to try to minimize the costs while trying to achieve as many different or meet as many of the different sectoral demands as possible. The community water model and the EPIC, the crop model, are both process-based models. So these are using information, biophysical information, to find, they're process-based. So they're using all the available information to, and changes in perhaps the biophysical conditions to look at the differences in either the hydrological information and also in the crop yields and crop and fertilizer requirements. And Marina, I also think is I don't want to be wrong, but I think it's also a process-based model.
Thank you very much. I think it's going to be quite useful, and I guess in all these models, we will look at references to our presentation so everyone can look further.
I tried to add as many here as possible, but if a question comes up and I see that there are references that I should add, I would be happy to add them here so that when the slides are shared, that they can be even more useful to people.
Yes, so please continue asking what you would like to get from us, and we'd be happy to deliver. So the second question, it's also not easy, I would say, but it's good that we ask. So from Abdul Karim, Zambezi is a transboundary river basin. I was expecting to see the benefits by riparian country. Any future development decision by the countries will be based on the benefits of the country derived. The tool can help in informing the cooperation among the countries. So it's not so much the question, it's a comment, but I hope you can relate to this comment.
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure, I didn't really have a lot of time to explain, but for example, in GloBiome, which is a global partial equilibrium model, we have the region that's represented by not just the sub-basins at the grid level, and at the 21 basin level, but they're also represented by individual countries. So the demand and production is balanced at the country level with imports and exports. So the different investment decisions and the profit maximizing of producers and consumers is taking place at a country level. The other modeling tools are using more either very high spatial resolution, as in with CWAT-M, but isn't with C1M, which is looking at the hydrological processes. But the other models, yes, those are considering the 21 basin sub-basins. So I think that partially answers that question.
Yeah, the question go to answered. If there are still continuing questions, that will be answered. And one more question before we do the break from Ansir. Can you please elaborate more on how you deal with irrigation area assessments?
Oh, I'm sorry. You broke up a bit. Can you repeat that question?
Yes. So the question is, can you please elaborate more on how you deal with irrigation area assessment?
Oh, of course. This is a topic I like to talk about. So we take into account 4 different kinds of irrigation systems. So the 2 of them are surface irrigation, so that's basin and furrow. Then we take in more efficient systems, sprinkler and drip. And these are adapted to either local informations, different reports from the Zambezi Basin, or and also taking into account the different costs associated with production and investments. And we also take into account we also model the irrigation crop water requirements. So these are at a monthly level, so about how much water is needed each month by different crops. And these are harmonized not only with other local statistics at the sub-basin level, but also at the national level. And we take into account the information from our let's see here. From our irrigated area assessments, which are using not just the national and subnational statistics, but are also taking into account these large estates that are modeled, for example, producing sugar. And I have a slide here, maybe I can show it really very, very quickly, in which we are comparing our downscaled irrigation crops by different basin with some of the estimates that come from the World Bank. And these are all by different sub-basins. And we found that while we don't have the full crop coverage from the downscaled, that we don't include the full crop coverage. So for example, we were missing coffee and different teas, that these actually performed pretty well, our downscaled techniques. So, but when I share this, I'll add that slide back so that you guys can have a look.
Thank you.